The moment Laney said we should come back to Powell's in November for the next one in the series. When it comes out, you'll love it. I stood in the middle of the blue room with a book I wasn't reading and realized I had been lying to her for 3 weeks. Not with words. I'm not that kind of person. Just with silence, which is worse, because silence lets the other person fill in whatever they want, and what Laney had filled in was a version of me that was still going to be here in November. I'm not going to be here in November. My name is Corbin Hail. I'm 29. I work as a structural engineer at a mid-size firm in Portland, or I did until 6 months ago when a headhunter from a company in Denver emailed me out of nowhere with a number that made me check my spam folder twice. I rent a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building in the Pearl District that costs more than it should and has a radiator that sounds like it's trying to apologize for something every night in February. My life was organized. That was the word I used. Organized. What it actually meant was that nothing surprising had happened to me in about 2 years, and I had made peace with that in the way you make peace with a mildly disappointing haircut. You stop thinking about it eventually. Then Laney moved into 4D. She arrived in March with 3 trips worth of boxes, a portable speaker, playing something I couldn't identify, but later learned was a bluegrass band from Asheville, and a look of focused determination that made me aside in the hallway without being asked. She was hauling a flat-pack bookshelf under one arm, like it had personally wronged her. 4th floor, she said, not to me, just to the air. No elevator. Great building choice, Laney. I offered to help. She said she was fine. The bookshelf hit the doorframe going in. She said she was fine again, louder, and I believed her the second time the way you believe someone who's clearly going to figure it out. She knocked on my door 20 minutes later. Do you have a drill? She asked. My bookshelf requires emotional support and a Phillips head. Her name was Laney Carr. She was 27, a botanical illustrator. She drew plants, technically, but when I said that she made a face like I'd called a cathedral a building. She drew plants for scientific journals and natural history archives, and, on her own time, large-format prints that she sold online. Flowers so detailed they looked like they were still breathing. I saw them, the one time she left her door open, and I caught a glimpse of her drafting table before I looked away, feeling weirdly like I'd walked in on something private. She had a way of giving her full attention to whatever she was looking at. A menu, a plant at the farmer's market, a sentence in a book, that made you want to be interesting enough to earn that look. I know that, because the first time she turned it on me, mid-conversation, about whether the Thai place on Burnside had gotten worse, or whether we'd just gotten pickier. I forgot what point I was trying to make. We became hallway people first, then coffee people. She made it strong and poured it into whatever mug was cleanest without ceremony, and I liked that. Then, Saturday market people. Then, without a formal announcement, the kind of people who texted each other links to things they'd seen online and knew would land. I want to be clear about something. I knew what was happening. I'm not oblivious. I noticed when she laughed at something I said, and then tried to cover the laugh with her hand, like it had surprised her. I noticed when she remembered I'd mentioned liking the rye loaf from the bread vendor and brought me half a loaf on a Tuesday for no reason. I noticed all of it. I just didn't act on any of it, which I told myself was the careful thing to do. And which was actually the cowardly thing to do, but calling it careful made it easier to sleep. The Denver offer came in January. I'd been interviewing quietly, not because I wanted to leave Portland exactly, but because the headhunter had been persistent and the firm was genuinely good, and sometimes you interview just to find out what you're worth to people who don't already know you. The offer was significant. Senior project lead, a title I wouldn't hit at my current firm for another 3 years, minimum. Benefits that made my current package look like a suggestion. I told myself I'd sleep on it. I slept on it for 2 months. Then I signed it, sent it back, and gave my boss 6 weeks' notice. I told no one else. Not my college roommate who lived 20 minutes away. Not my mother, who would have made it about her. And not Laney, who was the person I most wanted to tell and couldn't figure out how to. The thing was, telling Laney meant making it real in a way that signing a piece of paper hadn't. It meant saying out loud that I was choosing a city over whatever this was that we hadn't named yet. And because I couldn't figure out what to say, I said nothing and kept going to the farmer's market on Saturdays and kept accepting her half loaves of bread and kept telling myself I'd bring it up next time. That was 3 weeks ago. Standing in Powell's on a rainy Saturday in March, holding a book about bridge construction I'd already read twice, listening to Laney say we should come back in November, easy as breathing, like it wasn't even a question, was the moment I understood what 3 weeks of silence had actually cost me. Hey, she was looking at me now. You went somewhere. I'm here. You're physically here. Your face went on a short trip. She tilted her head. Everything okay? I put the bridge book back on the shelf. I have to tell you something. Laney closed the novel in her hands and gave me the kind of stillness that meant she'd already guessed it was serious. She was good at reading rooms, good at reading people, probably because she was used to looking at things carefully and recording what was actually there instead of what she expected to see. Okay, she said. There was no good order to say it in, so I just said it. I took a job in Denver. I gave notice 3 weeks ago. I move in May. The Blue Room of Powell's books is not a quiet place. There were at least 40 other people in it. Someone nearby was describing a plot to a friend in too much detail. The speakers overhead were playing something instrumental that had no opinion about anything. But when Laney didn't respond immediately, all of it fell away. She looked at the spine of the book in her hands. Then she set it carefully on the nearest shelf, not her section, just wherever she could reach, and folded her arms loosely across her chest. Okay, she said again. I should have told you sooner. Yes. Not it's fine or congratulations, or any of the polite things that would have made me feel better and let her off the hook at the same time. Just yes. One syllable that took up more space than most speeches. Were you going to? She asked. I opened my mouth to say something reasonable, something with context, and the part about how I didn't know how to bring it up. But she wasn't asking for logistics. I don't know, I said, which was the honest answer and the one that cost me the most to give. Laney nodded, slow, like she was turning the information over. She wasn't performing hurt. That would have been easier. She was just processing, quietly, which was worse, because quiet felt like watching a door close and not knowing if it had locked. I'm going to browse for a few minutes, she said. I'll meet you at the front. I stood in the mystery aisle for a while after she left. Someone reached past me for a paperback, said excuse me, didn't wait for an answer. I should have said something cleaner. I should have told her 3 weeks ago over coffee when there was still time to have it land gently instead of in the middle of a bookstore with no good exit. We walked back to the apartment mostly without talking. The rain had thickened. Laney had an umbrella. I didn't, because I'm an engineer who regularly ignores weather data, and she tilted hers toward me without being asked, which made the silence harder to carry. At the building entrance, she stopped. Denver is a good city, she said. I've never been. Neither have I. She looked at the glass door, then at me. I hope it gives you what you're looking for. She went upstairs. I stood in the lobby listening to the rain outside and trying to identify the feeling in my chest, which was less like sadness and more like the moment just before you realize you've made a structural mistake in a load-bearing wall. Not collapse, just the recognition that something is wrong and you've run out of time to pretend otherwise. I went to my apartment, sat at my kitchen table, which I never used for anything except stacking mail, looked at the city outside my window. The buildings I'd walked past for 4 years, the bridge I'd crossed so many times I'd stopped seeing it, the light going amber over the West Hills, in the way it did in March that made Portland look like it was apologizing for the winter. Then I thought about what I actually knew. I knew I had taken the Denver job because it was the smart move, and because I'd believed that was enough reason. I knew I'd stopped believing that somewhere between January and now, and I'd kept the belief going out of stubbornness. I knew the longest I'd thought about anything in the last 3 months was a conversation with Laney about whether moss counted as a plant or something else. And I'd thought about it for 2 days afterward, and I'd had no equivalent thought about the senior project lead position. I knew I did not want to go. I sat with that for a long time. not because I was dramatic about it. Because I'd spent 2 years making careful decisions, and careful decisions deserve at least one night of actual consideration before you undo them. In the morning, I called the Denver firm. The hiring manager was professional about it. Disappointed, he said, which I believed. He asked if it was a competing offer. I said no. He waited for an elaboration I didn't give him. We hung up on good terms, technically. Then I called my boss and told her I'd made a mistake and asked if the position was still mine. She was quiet for a long moment. She had every right to be, and then she said, "I hadn't posted it yet. I owe you a better conversation than the one I gave you 6 weeks ago." "Yes," she said, in the exact same tone Laney had used in the bookstore, and I understood it meant the same thing. "You do, and we'll get there, but that's not today's problem." I knocked on 4D at 9:15. Laney opened the door in a paint-stained sweatshirt with a coffee mug that said "Keep it weird," which I hadn't known she owned, and which felt like new information about her. I was relieved I still had time to collect. "I turned it down," I said. She looked at me. "When?" "20 minutes ago." "Why?" The question wasn't suspicious, just direct. Laney asked things the way she drew them, exactly, without softening the line. "Because Denver isn't why I was leaving," I said. "I was leaving because I thought getting somewhere better was the same as building something good, and I figured out they're not." She absorbed that. "That's very architectural of you." "Civil engineering, actually." "The metaphor still works." She stepped back from the door. "Do you want coffee?" I did. I came in. We sat at her kitchen table, which she actually used, and which had a plant on it, a succulent with a hand-lettered tag in her handwriting identifying the species and the date she'd gotten it. "I asked about it," she explained. "I asked a follow-up question that was dumber than I intended." She answered without making me feel dumb, which I noticed and filed. After a while, she set her mug down and said, "I was going to give you the out." "What out?" "The one where I say it's fine, Denver sounds great. Good for you." I had it ready. She looked at the plant. "I'm not sure I would have meant it." "I'm not sure I would have believed it," I said. She looked at me, and for the first time since the bookstore, the careful look she used for things she was studying became something warmer. Not soft, exactly. Honest. "Saturday," she said. "There's a breakfast place on Mississippi I've been waiting for an excuse to try. Eggs Benedict, but with Dungeness crab. They do a wait, so we'd need to be there before 9. "Is that a date?" I asked, because I'd spent 6 months not asking the clear question, and I was done with that particular hobby. "Yes," she said. "Is that okay?" "More than." She smiled into her coffee. "There he is." Saturday arrived cold and bright, the way Portland sometimes manages in March, like it remembered being good at it. I was outside her door at 8:40 with a jacket I'd actually checked the weather for, and no umbrella, on principle. She came out in a rust-colored coat and boots and looked so completely right for the morning that I forgot my opener. "You're staring at the door frame," she said. "I was looking at your coat." "That's allowed. Come on. I want to get there before the wait hits 40 minutes. The place on Mississippi was narrow and warm and smelled like butter and coffee in the ratio that means someone in the kitchen actually cares. We got there at 8:55. The wait was 22 minutes. We stood on the sidewalk in the cold, and she told me about a commission she'd just accepted. A full-page illustration for a botanical journal documenting a species of fern that only grew in one county in Washington state. "How many people will see that?" I asked. "Maybe 500. Mostly researchers." She didn't say it like it was a limitation, more like a feature. "But the fern is real. The drawing will be accurate. In 50 years, if someone wants to know exactly what that plant looked like, this is what they'll have." I thought about the difference between building something that got seen by a lot of people and building something that would still be right when you were gone. Inside we ordered. She got the crab Benedict. I got the short rib hash because I couldn't help myself. We shared both without discussing it. At some point, she stole a piece of my toast and offered me a forkful of the crab hollandaise in trade. And when I said it was the best thing I'd eaten in months, she looked quietly pleased in a way that wasn't performance. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "You're going to regardless. Go ahead. Why didn't you just say it? At the bookstore. If you were hurt, you could have told me. She considered that the way she considered everything, not fast. Because it wasn't mine to be heard about yet, she said. You hadn't promised me anything. I would have felt like I was claiming something I hadn't been offered. You could have asked. So could you. That landed. She knew it. She didn't twist the knife, just let it sit. You're right, I said. I know. She pushed a piece of crab toward me. Eat. You're doing the engineering face again. What's the engineering face? Like you're calculating load-bearing capacity in real time. She smiled, not teasing. It's not a bad face, just not necessary right now. After breakfast, we walked north along Mississippi and then east, not going anywhere in particular, the way you walk when the conversation is good enough that the destination becomes irrelevant. She told me about growing up in Bozeman, Montana, the youngest of three, with a father who kept a greenhouse in the backyard and treated it like a second religion. I told her about my mother's apartment in Cleveland and the summer I spent at 14 doing inventory at my uncle's hardware store, and deciding I wanted to understand how structures stayed up. Same impulse, she said. How do you figure? You wanted to know why things held. I wanted to record them before they changed. She tucked her hands into her coat pockets. Just different directions. I had been careful around Laney for 6 months. Careful not to want too much, careful not to say the wrong thing, careful to leave enough space that I could tell myself nothing had started yet. What I understood, walking east on a cold March morning, was that careful had kept me from leaving and had almost made me leave at the same time. At the corner of Alberta, she stopped and looked up at the mural on the side of a building, a botanical illustration, huge, some kind of flowering vine covering the whole wall. I hadn't noticed it in 4 years of living here. I noticed it now. I like your city, she said. It's yours too. She looked at me sideways and the corner of her mouth moved. Yeah, I guess it is. I took her hand, not dramatically, not as a moment, just because it was there and I was done making things complicated. She looked down at our hands, then up at me. She didn't pull away or make it bigger than it was. She just let it be what it was, which was exactly how she handled most things that mattered. She laughed once, the surprised kind, the kind she used to cover with her hand, and this time she didn't bother. Just let it go. The sound of it did something irreversible to the morning. We stayed like that through the length of the block, through 2 more corners, all the way back to the Pearl District. At the building stairs, she turned. I'm going to work this afternoon, she said. The fern waits for no one. That's a good sentence. I know. I've been saving it. She looked at me with that straight-on directness I'd been failing not to want for 6 months. Come over for dinner. I cook on Sundays. Nothing impressive, pasta, whatever's in the fridge. I'll bring the bread. The rye? The rye. She nodded, satisfied, and turned toward the stairs. Halfway up the first flight, she looked back. Corbin. Yeah. I'm glad you stayed. She said it simply. Not like a reward, not like a conclusion, just like a true thing she thought I should know. I watched her reach the 4th floor landing, heard her door open and close. Then I went into my apartment, sat on the couch, and thought for a long time about the difference between an organized life and a built one. The fern drawing came out in June. She showed me a print before the journal published. Full page. The plant rendered in meticulous ink, every frond exact, her initials in the lower right corner. 500 researchers would see it. They would trust it because it was accurate. They would use it because it would still be right in 50 years. I looked at it for a long time. You should frame this one, I said. I have 16 in the closet. I frame the ones that surprise me. Did this one? She looked at the fern, then at me, no. But the year did. By October, she had a drawer in my apartment that started as temporary and became something else without anyone announcing the change. Her coffee mug, the Keep It Weird one, lived in my cabinet next to mine, and I'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing things that belong. In November, we went back to Powell's. Her book had come in. I found one about bridge failures in the Pacific Northwest that I didn't need and bought it anyway. We stood in the blue room for a while, in the same aisle, where 8 months ago I'd finally told her the truth, and she said something about a book she wanted to find in the spring. Easy as breathing. We should look for it in April. And I didn't go still this time. I just said, I'll put it in the calendar. She looked at me with that quiet, full attention look, the one I'd been trying to earn for almost a year. Good, she said. And in the middle of the mystery aisle, with 40 other people around us and the rain starting outside, she turned a page and leaned slightly into my shoulder, and I thought, this is what I stayed for. Not the city, not the job, not the known quantity of a life I'd already mapped out and half believed in. This, the small true thing, the person beside me who looked at what was actually there. That was enough to build on.